help us understand a little bit about what your dating life has been like so far.
Yeah, so I've had really positive experiences. I would say relationships and partnerships. I've had very positive experiences. Not so much the dating.
Okay.
I've had some horror stories, some horrific experiences. So they say, don't talk about religion, politics, da da da. That's all I want to talk about. I want to make sure we're not wasting anyone's, because these are the things that I truly value. And if we're not aligned on these things, a relationship, we're not compatible.
I think about us not only not wasting as much time as possible, but also trying to filter out people who don't share values, as you were touching on, that you really know that are important to you.
Right.
Things that you align yourself with, things that if they're not held in common, it won't work. Let's move on there. All right, so now we're gonna make a little bit of a pivot because we've talked at length about family, which again I really appreciate. So let's talk a little bit more personally about Marissa. So help us understand a little bit about what your dating life has been like so far.
Yeah, so I've had really positive experiences. I would say relationships and partnerships. I've had very positive experiences. Not so much the dating.
Okay.
I've had some horror stories, some horrific experiences.
I'm sure, as most of us have.
Oh my goodness. But I will say, I grew up very young. My first boyfriend, I'd say, was 13. I've been dating consistently since. I'd say, and I think this is my controversial opinion on, people always say first dates, things not to talk about. I am the exact opposite. That's all I want to talk about because, where I sit, I'm dating to look for a partnership, for a relationship. And to me, if on your first date, I feel like you're on your best behavior. I feel like you meet someone, right, and you want to be respectful and you want to be kind and you want to put your best foot forward. Mm-hmm. And if my goal is to seek a partner, that feels like a safe space to pick your brain and see if we are aligned on the things that matter most to me.
Agreed.
So they say, don't talk about religion, politics, da da da. That's all I want to talk about. I want to make sure we're not wasting anyone's, because these are the things that I truly value. And if we're not aligned on these things, a relationship, we're not compatible, right? We can be friends, right? I have friends with a million differing views, right? But partnership wise, so I think the reason I've had such good relationships is because that first date, it lasted for hours talking about things that you are not supposed to talk about, right? And just ensuring that we were aligned there, and then the rest comes easy after that. The rest, No,
I would agree. I think that, and I don't know who had that conventional wisdom, but I do think that it is important to talk about those harder concepts. If, I want to put a big if here, if you're dating intentionally.
Right.
That's the word that I always like to use, because for a lot of us, I think that, especially when we're younger, we're just sort of falling into things. We're not necessarily moving in a way where we want to seriously evaluate if this type of person can grow into this type of relationship with this type of longevity. I think we're more like, I like the way you look, and we kind of keep it very superficial. And because of that, we're like, well, if that part's good, maybe the other things would just sort of come into play, as more time progresses. And as I gotten older, I think that that's not necessarily I'll just put it like this. I think it's not gonna serve us well for the long term, because of one of the key things that you said. You talked about time. I think about us not only not wasting as much time as possible, but also trying to filter out people who don't share values, as you were touching on, that you really know that are important to you. Right. Things that you align yourself with, things that if they're not held in common, it won't work. So I agree with you in that regard. I think we need to lay those things out in the beginning, so that way, if we imagining the other alternative, if we dated for like 5 weeks and then we finally have the discussion, you're like, well, these are these things that I really need. And you're like, well, I can't give you those things.
Yeah.
Then what have we been doing for 5 weeks?
Exactly. But I think that comes with the experience, right? That's why I feel like I'm 55 years old trying to date, because I feel like I did all that, right? And also, we talk about our past experiences, our family lives that shape us into who we are. I I've had relationships that I feel like were so successful and I can speak so highly of them, and they ended, right? Like, I am single and I wouldn't trade them for the world. And my whole family is always like, Marissa dates the best guys. I've had such good experiences that I know it's possible. And so that's why when I see those red flags, or, you know, I'm having these conversations and little things are starting to like not sit right, bye. Like, right. I'm not so interested in just like, let's just see how it goes, because I've done that. I've dated for years, you know, and I move with a different intentionality now.
Agreed. And that's essentially what I'm trying to get us to when I'm even engaging this particular topic. It's just thinking like, how serious are you going about the process of dating and courtship if you really want, not only if you want to be taken seriously, but if you want that person to take you seriously, and making sure like, are you presenting the most well-composed version of yourself, meaning you know what you're looking for, you've done that inner work so you can articulate it to somebody, and then you of course want them to do that in return, so that way you have a very clear picture. This is what Marissa wants, this is what I want. Is it compatible, yes or no? If it is, great, let's continue. If not, maybe we need to move separately.
And your honest self, right? Because I also think first dates, we meet someone, we want to be the best, and we want to present ourselves in this amazing way, and we might stretch something and say something that's not exactly right.
I'm a CEO.
Yeah, well, that's a stretch, but or maybe like, oh yeah, I'm moving out this month. Yeah. Right? And you're not moving out this month, right? And those little things, like, if you don't put your honest self forward and those things come out, now it looks like a lie. And this has happened, right? And I don't think the intention is like, I'm gonna lie, you know? I think we really feel like, I want them to like me, right? We want to be likable. And so we say the things that we think are going to get them to like us, but then it all comes out in the wash, right?
Of course. No, and I agree with you. I think that best foot forward is always going to be like the initial kind of way we present, right? But I do think the quicker we can get to where I'm being my most authentic self when I'm talking, I do think that's mostly the most important part, because then at least that person can get a more holistic evaluation of what you're about. And then they can decide, you know, do I want to continue or not? And then of course, vice versa. What you're doing, at least the way I think of it, what you're putting out there is what you want to receive, right? So if I'm trying to put this most complete picture of myself, is because I want the most complete picture of you, so we can make a fair determination, right? All right, cool.